talk about sign numbers, which is our chapter 10. So again, the number line. I think some of you have seen this before, that we have a number line and we assume that we have a 0 at some point, and then the more we go to the right side, we basically go to the positive direction, okay? And the more we go to the negative side, we basically have more negative numbers. So basically, there are several things in life where we need negative numbers to represent. I'm saying, for an example, in some cases, negative numbers only means direction, okay? But in other cases, negative number has a real meaning. For an example, we have shown you how the temperature, in case of temperature, how the negative numbers has a huge, impact. For an example, if the temperature is 35 degree right now, and somebody said, okay, let's say temperature get 10 degree warmer, so that means what? You are going the positive direction of that number line, meaning you are going to the right side of the number line, 10 degree more, which will be like 45, right? And similarly, somebody said, okay, let's say it's getting 10 degree cooler, you are going basically from 35 to the left side, because the more you go to the left side, your number will get decreased because you are going to the more negative direction, okay? So, and also at some point, even in case of temperature, the temperature, let's say your temperature can go beyond 0. I'm saying it can be less than 0, because you can, let's say you can pass this 0 and you will go all the way. So we assume that the number line doesn't end. There are two directions. In both directions, it goes to the infinity. So in the positive direction, it goes to all the way to the positive infinity. Negative direction, it goes to all the way to negative infinity. That means there is no end, okay? Because nobody knows the definition of, I'm saying, the infinity. So you just go all the way every single time. You just keep going, okay? But in some cases, even if you have a negative number or a positive number, you always want to probably deal with the magnitude of the number. For an example, you have, let's say, two numbers. One is 4, one is negative 4, okay? But no matter it's 4 or negative 4, the original magnitude of the number is only 4, okay? To get those things, we use an operator in mathematics which called absolute operator, which are like two vertical bars. For an example, if you have something like this, negative 4, and you just have two vertical bars at the beginning and the end of the number with the sign, okay, then you just get the absolute value, okay? Now remember, in case of the negative number, the absolute value, for an example here, is negative 4, absolute value is 4. In case of positive number, it's also again 4, okay? Because whenever we say absolute value, that always will be a number without the sign, okay? But the thing is, so to some people it makes a little bit trouble, because we have a mindset that if there is no sign, that's positive, right? But whatever we get here, you don't think that's as a positive, you don't think that's as a negative number. It's just the magnitude of a number, okay? So there are several other symbols which we use in mathematics to compare two numbers. So some of the symbols are here, like less than, greater than, less than equal, greater than equal, not equal, okay? Now for an example, let's say I wrote 5 smaller than or less than 10. That means 5 is smaller, right? Because it's in the left side of 10 in the number line, right? 0 is greater than negative 3. Why? Because think about the 0 and negative 3. Negative 3 is in the more negative direction than 0 in the number line. So negative 3 is basically smaller. So 0 is basically greater, okay? So similarly, you can basically represent every single relation with this operator. I'm saying with this inequality symbols. I'm saying, so those are very useful. But some cases like this, for an example, we said less than or equal. But look at the negative 5 and negative 1. They are not equal, right? But we have still used less than or equal. We can still do that because we are saying it can be either less, meaning negative 5 can be either less than 1 or negative 5 is equal to 1. We know that negative 5 is not equal to 1. But any of these, either less or equal is true, you can always use the symbol. Same is for the greater or equal. And this is not equal, meaning 3 and 2 are not the same numbers. So, okay. Here we have, I think we have talked about the fractions for a long time, but now we are talking about the same thing, but with the signs. Okay. Now let's say if two numbers are positive, of course, remember as I said, whenever there is no sign, that means that's positive, unless you are just dealing with the absolute value, right? So factors of any two numbers, which when their numbers are positive, basically the fraction will be also positive, right? Now, if you have two numbers and they have multiple different signs like positive and negative, all you need to check is how many negative numbers you have, how many negative signs you have. For an example, you have two negative signs in each of these numbers. So whenever you have even number of negative signs, 2 is even, right? Then all the negative signs get cancelled, right? So then you will end up with positive numbers. So basically, all of these fractions are basically positive numbers because you have even numbers of negative signs, and the negative signs get cancelled with each other. Okay? But if your number has odd number of negative signs, odd means what? 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, right? So for an example, in this number you have only one negative sign, right? That's odd. This is also 1, there is also 1. See, we have shown you all different ways you can have the negative signs, right? Here the negative signs is with the numerator, here with the denominator is in the middle, meaning it can be either denominator or numerator. And here you have 3 negative signs, which is again odd. Whenever you have odd number of negative signs, the number is originally negative. Okay? Because whenever you have odd, even if you have 3 negative signs, 2 of them get cancelled, but still you will have one more left. So let's look at a couple of examples, example quizzes from the absolute value and the number relation. So absolute value of 15 is of course 15, right? So the right answer is A. Absolute value of negative 23 is 23, which is B. Absolute value of negative 13.5 is again 13.5, which is B. Absolute value of negative 0.25, of course 0.25, which is C. You write the same number without the sign, right? So it's 5.25. Right answer is D. Okay, let's see whether we can find some relation here. 5 is less than 3. That's not true. 5 is less than 5. That is not true either. 5 is less than 5.25, which is true. 5 is less than negative 6. That's not true because negative 6 is in the left side of 5. So the right answer is C here. Okay. Negative 2 is less than which one? I think the right answer is D, because you have 2 right choices here. Because negative 2 is less than negative 1. Think about the negative lines. So right answer is A and C both. So the right answer is actually D. Okay? Because if you think the negative number, you have a 0, then negative 1, then negative 2. Now, whenever you are comparing two numbers, just think about their positions in the number line. Now, if your negative 1 appears before negative 2, when you are going to the left direction, that means negative 1 is greater or larger than negative 2, right? And 0 is of course, because 0 is in the middle of positive and negative. So the right answer is D here. Negative 6 is greater than which one? Right answer is A, right? Because that's the only one which is smaller than negative 6, which is negative 10. Because the more you go to the left side, you'll first get negative 6 and then later you will get negative 10, right? So the right answer is A here. 25 is greater than right answer is D because it's greater than 20. At the same time, it's greater than negative 35, right? Oops. 25 is less than or equal so the right answer is D because look at these two. 25 is less than or equal 25. That is true because whenever I say less than or equal, as long as that is equal, I can write it. 25 is equal to 25, right? So that's true. And then B is also true because you are taking the absolute value of negative 25. And absolute value of negative 25 is nothing but 25. So both of these are basically 25. A and B. So the right choice is D. How about here? 25 is less than or equal right answer is B and C. So which is D? $25 is greater than equal. Right answer is A and B. Because 25 is greater than negative 35, 25 is also greater than negative 20. So we can just use both. So the right answer is D. Okay, now we'll see how we add two sign numbers. Okay. Now, if you add two numbers, first of all, if both of the numbers have the same sign, just add the numbers and keep the sign. Now look at this example. Let's say 5 plus 7. You are adding 5 and 7. Both numbers are positive. You add it and you keep the sign which is positive. Again, you are here. You have two numbers, negative 5 and negative 7. They both have the same sign. So whenever they have same sign, you will add. But you will keep the sign. You are adding 7 and 5, which makes it 12. But look at the sign is negative because they have same sign and sign was negative. But when the sign is different, you are dealing with two numbers, signs are different. When the signs are different, you will subtract them. Subtract, of course, from the larger to the smaller from the larger one, but you will keep the sign of the larger number. Okay, for an example here, you have negative 6 and positive 4, so the signs are opposite. So you subtract, you get 2, but you keep the sign of 6 because 6 is larger than 4. So and then you end up with negative 2. Here, signs are different. You do the subtraction. And you keep the sign of 7 because 7 is larger than 4. You just compare two numbers, okay, 7 and 4, as an absolute number. Again, whenever numbers are same and signs are different, that will be 0, right? Let's check some here. But in a lot of cases, when you deal with the signs, you might see a lot of different signs in front of one number, then you'll have to determine what it is. But remember, it's always like that. If you have odd numbers of negative sign, it will be negative. Otherwise, everything is positive. Okay? So two adjacent positive is always positive. Two opposite signs always will be a negative. Okay? But to same sign, if they are negative and they are even, 2 is even, right? So that becomes positive. So these are some examples. I think we already have some understanding on these, because we know that if we subtract and the larger number has, but always you can do is you can think about like this. For an example, if you have 5 minus 9, you can always think 5 plus negative 9. So in the middle, you can always put a positive sign, and then you can see what it is. Now you can see that they have different sign. Of course, you will be doing the subtraction. and you will keep the sign of 9, which is negative, right? So it's a pretty much a similar example. Okay, let's see whether we understand some of this addition here. 3 plus 2, of course, 5. 3 plus negative 2 is subtraction, right? Because they have different sign. So it will be 1, and you will keep the sign of 3, which is positive. So it will be positive 1, right answer is C. So they have same sign, right? Negative 3, negative 2, they have same sign, so you'll add them, but you'll keep the sign. So the right answer is negative 5. So right answer is A. How about this one? See, we always wanted to have a positive sign between two numbers. Now, how can you get a positive sign here? So your number is negative 3, negative 2, negative 2. Now remember, when you have consecutive two negative signs, you can cancel them as a positive number, right? That's basically something like this. Negative 3 plus 2. Okay? Now if you want to see what are what, so negative 3 is a negative number and the 2 is a positive number. So you have opposite sign. You have opposite sign. It will be a subtraction. But you keep the sign of 3, right? Because 3 is larger than 2. It's negative 1. Right answer is D here. How about this one? It's just 3 plus 2, right? Because the negative and negative makes positive. It's just 3 plus 2, 5. Right answer is B. Negative 3 plus 2. They have different sign, right? They have different sign. So it will be a subtraction. You keep the sign of 3. So right answer is D. Okay, now when you have several numbers in sequence in one line or multiple line, how you deal with those numbers? So all you have to carry is when you have such things, multiple numbers, you always just consider two numbers at a time, do the operation, and again take another 2, do the operation. You'll keep doing this. But remember, I'm talking about the expression where you have all the positive or negative signs. Okay? If you have something else like multiplication or division, that's different. Okay? At this point, I'm just talking about the positive or negative signs. Okay. Now, here, let's say I start from left side always in case of positive and negative signs. So I'm dealing with 7 and negative 4 first. So it will be a subtraction. So it will be 3, right? And then I can deal with 3 and negative 8. It will be again a subtraction, but the sign will be negative because 8 is negative, right? So, because you think 3 minus 8 as this. Whenever you see 3 minus 8, remember I said every number, whenever you're doing some operation, you always think that they have positive sign. If you have 3 minus 8, you will think 3 plus minus 8. Now you see that what's going on here. 3 is positive, 8 is negative, so you are doing subtraction. So subtraction, you will end up with 5. You will end up with 5, but you will keep the sign of 8. Now you have negative 5 and positive 9. This will be a subtraction again, but you'll keep the sign of 9, which is 4. Okay. There is another way of doing it, but some people think like this. They just always add all the positive numbers. They add all the negative numbers. Now, for an example here, what are positive here? 7 is positive, 9 is positive, right? You add 7 and 9, you get 16. And you add all the negative numbers like this one. You add negative 4 and negative 8, that makes negative 12. So once you have these, you do the subtraction, right? You do the subtraction, you get a 4, right? Any question here? Let's move on. Now let's check this example. Remember, what do? We start from the left side, right? And we first look at these two. This will be what? Addition, right? Because both numbers have the same sign. As long as they have same sign, we add. But we keep the sign. So negative 3 plus negative 4, it will be a negative 7. Then it will be negative 7 plus 2 plus 5. You'll be always dealing with the left side too, right? Now this is a what? A subtraction, right? This is going to be a subtraction. So it will be negative 5. Because you keep the sign of 7. And then you have positive 5, it will be a 0. So the right answer is 0, which is 8. But you can do a different manner. Remember I said you can always add all the positive numbers, all the negative numbers. So you have two negative numbers here, which is negative 3 and negative 4, which makes negative 7. You have two positive numbers here, 2 and 5, which makes 7 as well. So you have positive 7, negative 7, that makes 0 as well. Let's look at another example here. What is the right answer here? Negative 3, negative 4, plus 2, plus 5. So you first deal with these two. Now, remember I said you always just make everything positive at the middle. So negative makes positive, so this becomes positive, right? Then this is a subtraction because they have different sign. So it will be only 1. And then you add plus 2 plus 5. 3 plus 5 is 8, right? The right answer is 8, which is D. This is what? 3? Because negative 3 plus 4 is what? 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 minus 5. They have different sign. Subtraction. You keep the sign, so it will be negative 2. Right answer is C. Let's see how we do the multiplication and division of the sign numbers. Okay. To multiply sign number, you just multiply, you first disregard the signs, multiply them, but at the end, no matter you are doing division and addition, you just disregard the sign first, and at the end you always count how many negative signs you have. If you have even number of negative signs in total, the result will end up a positive number. Okay. But if you have an odd number of negative signs, like 2, not like 3, like 1, or like 7, like 5, your answer will be negative. Okay? So, for an example, 7 times 3 is 21. Negative 4, negative 9, you just multiply 4 and 9, that becomes 36. But you counted there are 2 negative signs. So, answer will be positive. Right? Same is here, 27 divided by 9 is 3. Negative 9 divided by negative 3, you just divide 9 by 3, that makes 3. Then you look at the signs, right? How many negative signs you have? 2, so it will be positive number then, right? But here as well, you see they have one negative sign, so it will be just negative, right? Because it's even number. So that's the summary, right? That's the final thing, that if you have an even number of negative sign, it will be always positive. Odd number of negative sign, always negative. Okay. Now remember, anytime you see some expression with a lot of parentheses, they are basically multiplication. Okay. You are basically multiplying, because a lot of times they don't use multiplication, they just use the parentheses between two numbers. So negative 3 times negative 4. You just multiply the number without thinking about the sign. You get 12. And then there are even number of negative signs, so it will be a positive number. Right answer is A. 12, right? Negative 3 times 4 is negative 12, right? Negative 15 by 3. Negative 3. Right answer is C. So you just divide 20 by 5, you get 4. How many negative signs do you have? 3. It's odd, so the answer will be negative then. So it will be negative 4. Right answer is B. Negative 20 times negative 5 is 4, right? Now let's look at some problem with the sign. Some word problems. Now to solve the word problems, you first will determine the sign of the numbers and designate the signs with the numbers. Because you'll be given some numbers in the question, right? Okay, so from the question you read the number and you will identify which will be a positive number and which will be a negative number. Then you will determine the mathematical operation. Now what do we mean by mathematical operation? So you'll have to determine whether it will be an addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, or it will be a combination of multiplication, subtraction. So you'll determine that, and then you will do the math accordingly. Okay. So let's look at an example here. Let's say we have a checking account that had a balance of 1,000 at the end of July. In August, we have an electronic deposit of $500 and checks written, meaning 700, 150. What is the balance at the end of August? Now this is what we have. At the beginning, remember all the balances, all the basically the balance you have at the beginning, all the deposits, those are positive. And all the checks you are writing, all the withdrawals you are making, those will be negatives. So I started with 1,000 because we had a $1,000 balance in the account. And then there is a deposit of 500, and then we have written checks, 3 checks, right? Those were 700, 100, and 550. Now it's very simple, it's just an addition and subtraction problem. So there are 2 choices. You just add all the positive numbers, you add all the negative numbers, and you do the math. Okay? I added the positive numbers here, that makes 1,500. And I added all the negative numbers, that makes 850, right? The last 3 numbers are negative, 700, 150. So that's how I get these. And then now I'll do the math. Now 1,500 and 850, they have different signs. So it will be a negative, it will be a subtraction, right? We did the subtraction, which is 650, and I kept the sign of the highest, greater number, which is 1,500, which is positive. So that means the account has still a balance of 650. See, this is exactly, just what we have seen, that how you do the, apply those, whatever you have learned right now, the positive and negative signs, how you deal with multiple ones in the same line, but you have a word problem, okay? So, in some cases, you have to deal with some other operations like powers and roots. Now in case of power, let's say for an example, let's say if your power is 2, for an example here, let's say if your power is 2, 3 square, so you'll be basically multiplying 2 times, right? 3 times 3. It's called 3 squared, or 3 raised to the second power, or 2 cubed. So you are basically multiplying 2 3 times. 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. Multiplying to 5 times 32, right? But in some cases you have to deal with the root. But root is an interesting number. Now let's say, what is the root of 25? Now you have to find a number which will be multiplied by itself to make 25, which is 5, right? 5 times 5 is 25. But the problem is this: instead of 5, if you have a negative 5 and you multiply negative 5 with negative 5, still you get 25, right? Because there are 2 negative signs and they get cancelled. Because there are even number of negative signs, you get 25. So that's why square root of 25 would be positive 5 or negative 5 both. That's why we write it like this. Square root of negative 5 is plus minus 25. Now how we are writing the square root? We use a symbol like this. And also sometimes we use, instead of the square root, we just say the power is half. Anytime you see the power is half, that means you are talking about the square root. It's the same thing, okay? So that means square root of 25 is 5 and negative 5 both. That's why we write 5 plus minus 5. That means it can be plus 5, it can be negative 5, both. Okay. The cubic root is a little bit different than this. Cubic root is written like this. It is still the square root symbol, but there is a 3 here. Now that means you have to find a number such that which will be multiplied by itself 3 times to get 27. Of course, which is 3, right? Because if you multiply 3 times, you get 27, right? 3 times 3 times 3. So the square root of 27 is 3. But it cannot be negative 3, because if you multiply something negative 3 times, it will be negative, right? It cannot be plus 27, because 3 is a negative number. But how about the cubic root of negative 27? That will be, of course, negative 3, right? Because if you multiply negative 3 times by itself, you'll get negative 27, right? So the cubic root of negative 27 is negative 3. Okay, these are some examples that how you basically all you do is you just multiply the same number by the number of times the power is. Your power is 3, so you multiply 2 3 times, right? Your power is 2, you multiply the 7 2 times. Let's go to the next section here. Okay. So still we are talking about the power, but the interesting part is the power can be for the negative numbers too. Now for an example, you have a negative 2 and you are squaring the number, right? So it's negative 2 times negative 2. You multiply the number, you get 4. You look at the sign, you have 2 negative sign, which is positive. But you have to be, it can be a little bit tricky. Look at the difference here. You are writing negative 2 square, but the difference between the first one and the second one is, in the first one, negative sign square is applied to the negative sign, because you are squaring negative 2. In the second one, you are squaring only 2, not the negative sign, because there is no parenthesis. So basically you will keep the sign outside of the parenthesis, and then you are multiplying 2 times 2, which is still negative 4. So be careful about that. Whenever you have a parenthesis, and then whatever you have inside the parenthesis, those will be under your square root or cubic root or whatever the, under your square or cube or whatever the power is. Okay? This is an important difference here to notice, because in the second one, this negative sign is not squared. Okay? So they are not same. Be careful about that. Okay? I will show you some more example. For an example here, look at this. Negative 7 square. So it's like negative 7 times negative 7, right? Which becomes positive 49. But here is negative 2 times to the power cube. So you'll be multiplying negative 2 3 times. But at the end, you'll get 8. But you have an odd number of negative signs. So it will be a negative number, which is negative 8. Right? And another interesting thing is, anything to the power 1 is that number. For an example, we said 2.7 to the power 1 is always to the power 2.7. But anything to the power 0, it's a very important thing. Anything to the power 0 is 1, no matter what the number is. No matter what the number is. It can be 1 million, it can be 500, it can be negative 200, it can be whatever. If your power is 0, it's always 1. Look at all the answers. All the answers are 1, no matter what the number is. If the power is 0, it's always 1. This is a very important property you need to know for solving any algebraic or mathematical expression. Okay? If the exponent is 0, it's always true. So now, how about if the exponent is negative? For an example, here, look at this. Your exponent itself is negative. Now here, look at this. Exponent is negative 2, right? When the exponent is negative, what we do is we assume that the numerator is 1 And the same thing we assume as a denominator with the positive exponent. Now for an example, look at this example. It was what? 5 to the power negative 2, right? We assume that the numerator is 1, but the same thing will go to the denominator, but the power becomes positive. Now we know how to do this, right? Because numerator is 1, denominator you have 5 square, which is like 5 times 5. It's like 1 over 25, right? Be careful about that. When the exponent is negative, you always assume that there is a 1 at the numerator, and the same thing goes to the denominator, but the power becomes positive. Then we deal with that. Okay. Let's look at some example. 4 square is meaning what? 4 times 4, right? 16. Negative 4 square. It's negative 16, right? Because the important thing is negative is not under square. Negative is out of square, right? You did not square the negative sign. Negative 4 whole square is 16, because your negative sign is under the square. So you are basically squaring the whole thing, so which is like negative 4 times negative 4, which makes 16, and then there are 2 negative signs, that makes positive, right? So the right answer is B here. Square root of 9. You need to find some number which will be multiplied 2 times to get 9. Right answer is D, right? Because positive 3 if you multiply you get 9. Negative 3 if you multiply you get 9. So both answers are right, so the right answer is actually D. This is the cubic root, right? Whenever you have a cubic root, how you deal with this? You have to find a number which will be multiplied 3 times by itself to get 8, which is of course 2. Right answer is A, because 2 times 2 times 2. You are multiplying 2 3 times, right? You get 8. Right answer is A. Cubic root of negative 8. So you have to find something which is multiplied 3 times to get negative 8, which is B here, right? Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, which is negative 8. Okay, so we'll look at how you group the symbols. So for an example, let's say you have these operations here. It's simple because you have groups. You just do math between 6 and negative 9, that becomes negative 3. And 5 minus negative 3, that becomes 2. And then later you just do the operation between negative 3 and 2. Okay? So when you have the parenthesis, you just deal with the parenthesis first, right? Now if a problem contains more than one set of parentheses, remove the innermost set first. So look at this one, you have multiple parentheses, right? So the innermost one is what? 3 minus 8, you deal with that, you get negative 5. Then you look at the outer one. So negative makes it positive here. 9 plus 5 makes it 14. Now you deal with 6 minus 14. Both numbers have different sign. You do the subtraction. You keep the sign of the larger number, which is negative, so it's just a negative 8, right? So, and also, this is, you have already seen this, but just a reminder, this 6 is basically multiplied with 9, right? This 6 is multiplied with the whole expression here. Anything outside the parenthesis is basically multiplication, unless there is a positive or negative sign between that number and the parenthesis. Negative sign outside means again a multiplication, but that changes the sign of the whole thing, because look at this inside, you have 3 minus 10, which makes negative 7, right? But there is a negative outside, so that negative and this negative get multiplied, and you have two negative signs that get cancelled, so you end up with 7. Same is true for the next expression as well. Okay. So here as well, the negative sign, look at the negative sign. Sometimes people deal like these. They have a negative sign at the beginning. They just open up the outermost. This is another way of doing it. You don't have to, but if you want, you can just open up the outermost parenthesis. Now whenever you open the outermost parenthesis, all the operators get changed, because before 9 it was positive, now it's negative. Before 4 it was positive, negative, it becomes positive. Before 3 it was positive, now it's just negative. Okay? Everything gets changed, meaning everything gets flipped. Okay? But instead you could have done just like this. You could have just multiplied 3 times negative 10, that makes 30, and then you deal with all these numbers inside the parentheses, and then later you can deal with the negative sign. This is an alternative way. Some people just find it useful, easier. But you don't have to do this. It's up to you. Again, we're showing the same thing here. So parentheses used to separate a negative sign from an arithmetic sign do not need to be removed until they are no longer needed for clarity, because you don't have to remove it, but if you want to remove it, all the signs get changed, right? Now, here we go. We have everything comes together right now in one single thing. So you have here addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, parentheses, sign, number, everything together. Okay. So for an example, how you deal with this? 2 times negative 14, right? That's a multiplication. So you just write negative 28 here. This is what? 7 plus 7, that's 14. And here, this is a division, right? 28 divided by 14, that becomes 2, but the sign is negative. So that's negative 2, negative 2. They have same sign, so they will be added. That makes negative 4 multiplied by 2 outside. Gets negative 8, right? Make sure when you do it in pause, don't do it on your head. Make sure you write it down. So a lot of times it helps, okay, because there are plenty of different operations you have to deal. Okay. If you look at the next one, how you are dealing, you always take care of the parentheses, the innermost one first, right? So this is the innermost one, where it's 4 plus 2, which makes 6, right? Then you add 3 plus 6, that's 9. You square root of 9, that makes it 3. 3 plus 3 is 6, simple. Same is here, but there is an absolute. Remember at the very beginning we talked about the absolute operator. This is the absolute operator, vertical bars, right? So 3 minus 5, which makes it negative 2. But absolute value of negative 2 is always 2, because you just get rid of all the signs, right? So it's 2, 4 plus 2 is 6. And then you have an outermost negative sign, which multiplied the 6, so it's negative 6. I'm saying the final answer is negative 6. Okay, so how you group? Within grouping symbols, start with the innermost parenthesis first, right? You always work with the innermost one, and then eventually you go to the outward ones. Okay, finally the outmost one, finally the outermost one, and then powers and roots in any order, because if you have power and root, which one goes first doesn't matter. Okay. But if you have multiplication and division in the same line, you always start from the left side. Meaning, whichever comes first. Maybe the multiplication is in the left side, you do the multiplication first. Maybe the division is the left side, you do the division first. Okay? And then later you do the addition and subtraction. In case of addition subtraction, you do the same thing. You start with the left side one first. Okay? So, this is the order of how you will solve the problem. You first deal with the parentheses. Inside the parentheses, you will look for the operators. If your operations are power and root, no matter which order you do, you first do those. After that, you deal with the multiplication division. If you have multiple multiplication and multiple divisions, you always start with the left side one. If you have addition subtraction later, you deal with those at last, but again from the left side. Okay? This is the ordering of how you will deal with all the operations once everything is together, okay, in one place. We have some more examples here. Okay? We have some more examples here. So if you look at all this example, we are dealing with this whole thing first. But inside this one, you have a positive sign, you have a division, you have a 1. Which one you will deal with first? You will of course work with the division first. So 6 divided by 3, it becomes 2, right? And it becomes 9 minus 2 plus 1. Let me. Let's see. Let me write it here. Then it becomes 4 minus 6, right? Negative 1, and then you have 9 plus 6 by 3, negative 6 by 3 plus 1, right? So let's see how we deal with only this part, okay? Let's focus on this. So you have division here. Let's make it negative 1 plus, this becomes negative 2 plus 1, right? Negative 1. Then here, you start with the left side, right? Because you have all the positive and negative signs. 9 plus negative 2. That makes it 7, right? That becomes 7 plus 1. Negative 1 times 8. Okay? Did I write it correctly? Oh, there is. I'm saying they have done it different way because they have other operators as well. But so you can think every single numerator and denominator separately. I'm just taking one numerator and deal with that. Okay. Same is true for the other ones. You just every single numerator and denominator you just deal with separately. And for an example, this is what you come up, and then you see at the end we get negative 8, right? Same is here. You just take care of this first. Inside this, you have to deal with this one first. This is the innermost parenthesis. If you deal with that, and then you have to take care of the whole thing, but you have to start from the left side. Because these are all positive and negative signs. You can. But you have to be extremely careful when you put the whole thing in the calculator, because if you miss a single thing, like any sign or the way you are writing the parentheses, the answer will be wrong. Okay? You can do the same thing at the same time. But remember, in some cases you find arithmetic where you might dividing by 0. Remember, anything divided by 0 is still undefined in mathematics. Okay? If for some reason you find that some expression end up with dividing by 0, your answer should be undefined. So you don't know the answer. Okay? Just choose undefined. There will be some option, I'm sure, if you have that problem. Okay? So let's look at a couple of small arithmetic examples here. So, what operators you have? You have multiplication, you have division, you have subtraction. So first of all, you have to deal with multiplication, division. Now, out of multiplication and division, which one you will deal with first? The one you have at the left side, right? Which is 2 times 3. So once you deal with that, 2 times 3 makes it 6, right? Then you have 10 over 2. You deal with that, it becomes 5. Now you will deal with subtraction, which makes it 1. Right answer is 1/8. Right? So this is what we have done here. We showed you how to do this, okay? How about this one? We still have pretty much a similar expression, but we changed a little bit. which operations you will deal first? We have 2 minus 3 times 10 divided by 5. You deal with multiplication or division first, but the multiplication in the left side, which will be dealt first, right? So this is the first operations. So it's 2 negative 30 divided by 5. Now we will deal with the division, which will be 2 minus 6. 30 by 5, 6, right? Now this is a subtraction, and I keep the sign of larger number, which is 6. So your answer will be negative 4, right? We showed how to do is here. Let's look at one more example. This is the last example for today. Then we'll go to the pause and we'll work on all the quizzes we have for this chapter. Okay, again, no matter what multiplication division you have, you always deal with the parenthesis first, right? So 10 minus 6 under the parenthesis, and you have division 10 minus 2 times 4 multiplication 3. Now let's deal with the parenthesis first. Inside the first parenthesis you have 10 minus 6, which is 4. Inside the second parenthesis you have two operations, but one of those is multiplication, so you will deal with multiplication first. So it's 10 minus 8. You do the multiplication here, which is 8. And then you are still not done with the parenthesis, so you will deal with 10 minus 8, which is 2, times 3. Now you have division, multiplication in the same line, but you start from the left side. So you will be dealing with this one first. 4 divided by 2 is 2, times 3, 6, right? So the right answer is 6, which is the last one. So here we showed how you do this, okay? Now let's go to the pause. This is the chapter 10. Let's go to the pause and complete all the quizzes we have from chapter 10, okay?